Hey guys, this is Martin, aka Anders, coming back to you with another video, this time a lot sooner. This video is going to hopefully be the first in what will be a series called Computing Competitive. The intent with this video is to take a major recent event and contrast it to the overall metagame numbers, to serve almost as sort of a canary in a coal mine. I don't know how many of you know that reference, but to give sort of not necessarily an in-depth look of the competition's meta in a meaningful way, but to look more so at the differences between it and the metagame at large to see what sort of early indicators we might be able to find in meta shifts. So with that said, we're going to jump right into it with the NSG T1 Invitational that happened. The NSG T1 Invitational was a tournament that was hosted on May 4th. The tournament structure was 8 teams, 6 invites, and 2 qualifiers, the 2 qualifiers being MSPAs as well as prospects, 2 major players in the Pro-Am circuit thus far. The tournament bracket itself was double elimination, with best of 3s in the upper bracket and best of 1s in the lower bracket. Interestingly, the entirety of the upper bracket where the best of 3s were saw nothing but 2-0s, excluding the grand final. Before we jump into anything involving compositions or agent pick rates, one thing I wanted to touch on was the map pool. The teams involved, the higher seed would choose a map, and then the lower seed would choose which side they wanted to start on. The maps included in the tournament were Bind, which was played 10 times, Haven, which was played 9 times, and Split played 3 times. Moving right into agent pick rates, I've structured the list from top to bottom in order of pick rate. I've also added indicators to show whether or not the agent was played with higher or lower frequency than their overall meta presence. Starting at the top, I'm sure no one's surprised to see Sage. Sage was played on both sides in every single game except for one where she was only on one side. That gives her a 97.7% play rate in the Invitational, which is functionally equivalent to her overall meta presence. Quickly moving down more of the list, we have Brimstone, who saw quite a bit more than his normal meta presence in this competition, Cypher, who saw quite a bit more than his normal meta presence in the competition, and Breach, who saw significantly more than his normal meta presence. For those of you who saw my compositional analysis of the meta, where I covered what I call sort of the common core, the Breach, Brimstone, Cypher, Sage, none of you are surprised to see that these 4 are the most played in the competition. Similarly, if you saw my last video, you know that Sova is their most common partner in crime, so he comes in next at 59.1% of the overall meta in the tournament, trailing quite a bit higher than his overall meta presence. Next up is where things get a little bit dicey. Despite what I was saying in my last video, it looks like Phoenix is kind of making a push into the metagame. He comes in at 29.5% of the tournament, just a little bit north of his overall meta presence. And if you then look below him, Raze, Omen, and Jet have all dipped significantly below their normal meta percentages. Last but not least, and by not least I mean definitely least, we have Viper. Viper comes in at a disappointing 4.5% of the overall metagame, appearing in only 2 matches. And so with agent pick rates on lock, what do the compositions look like in the competition? For those of you that watched my last video on the common core, things are going to look very, very familiar. To kick it off, we have a number of compositions that I'm not going to touch on in specific, but wanted to at least display for everyone should they be interested. These are compositions that showed up only one time across the competition. Some of them won, some of them didn't, but there was no significant play for them outside of a single match. I will mention briefly, though, that in an extremely odd twist of fate, Shroud's team managed to take down prospects with the only composition in the tournament to not run Sage. Moving into the meat and potatoes compositions of the tournament, we have Breach, Brim, Cypher, Sage, and Sova, the common core plus Sova, overwhelmingly at the top of the totem pole with 52.27% of all games played. And I should correct myself there, because this goes even beyond games played. This represents statistics of whether or not a team picked the composition when given an opportunity. This was so prevalent that there were countless matches where we saw it on both sides. And with good reason at that. With a 56.5% win rate, it was also the most successful composition with any meaningful sample size. Interestingly, the composition that comes in second on the totem pole is Breach, Brimstone, Cypher, Phoenix, Sage. You may remember from my last video that the Common Core plus Phoenix is the most underperforming variant of the comp. In spite of that, it was picked 20.45% of the time, with an impressive 55.6% win rate. Another interesting tidbit is that it was played by 3 unique teams in Brax, Shroud, and the newly minted Sentinels roster, and in the Sentinels case, it represented all but one of their matches. Part of me thinks this may be a result of it being sort of a newer team and them not necessarily having fleshed out how they want to play the meta, but I'll just as soon eat my words and sort of come to the light and see if Phoenix is actually as good as these guys seem to think. I look forward to seeing the Sentinels play in future competitions and see if they sort of cling on to this comp. Dropping significantly down to a only 9.09% play rate is the second most prevalent iteration of the Common Core Plus 1 comp with Raze that came in at a flat 50% win rate. The fourth most played composition was actually only played twice, but I wanted to keep it in play for one specific reason. The comp was Breach, Cypher, Phoenix, Sage, and Sova. This team comp was whipped out twice by Brax's team, and interestingly, forgoes Brimstone as well as Omen as primary smoke users, leaving their only functional smokes as the cyber cages from Cypher, and the composition didn't win either time. I think this is a strong indicator that you need more than a single agent worth of smokes. You can't put yourself into a situation where your team is denied smokes by a single agent being picked early in a round. Even if that agent happens to be a more defensive agent like Cypher where they're not likely to be picked off early in a round, I still think that limiting your flexibility to that extent is asking for trouble. And just to prove I'm not vain and rub a little salt in the wound, the composition that I railed on endlessly in my last video, Breach, Brimstone, Cypher, Phoenix, and Sage, for having such an abysmal win rate on Haven, went 4-3 on the map in this tournament, translating to a 57% win rate. There's still hope. And that about wraps us up. The T1 Invitational, co-sponsored by NSG Gamers, was a great competition. I know that both of those organizations have put a lot of effort into the Valorant scene, even this early on in its development, and I'm sure we'll see much more from them. If you guys like this content, please let me know. I'd love to sort of get this computing competitive series on the rails and more of a recurring topic. So please let me know if this is something you guys are interested in, or it's just something that I'm nerding out on and no one cares about. As usual, if you guys are enjoying my content, you can follow me elsewhere, both on Twitter and Instagram at AnderzzTV, or catch me on my streams also at AnderzzTV on Twitch. Thanks for watching as usual. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.